and specifically his book,
The Prince.
The Prince, Brown, he made it. Yeah, so I mean, if you don't know these things, don't even come to the exam tomorrow, because I mean, it's going to be a humiliation for you and for myself. So, you know, avoid to make don't great figure in front of the professor and to make the professor sad because he said one thing 100 times and you don't even remember it. So, the Prince, we use the Prince to understand how we get out from the Middle Ages. The Prince, 1532, 1532. This is, you know, what we used to see this long process. This book came out in a time in which in my city, Florence, there was intellectual movement called humanism. This intellectual movement was about the idea that we have to refocus on the human beings. After 1,000 years, we only focused on God and religion. Then, what we have followed is more or less what happened in the 2 centuries and a half later, because we take a lot of time to get to the Enlightenment. So we had the humanism. Let's restart to think about the human being at the center of the universe. We had the Renaissance, also an artistic movement which rediscovered antiquity as a source of inspiration, as a source of a civilization who thinks in terms of progress. Humanism, Renaissance, and we saw also the Protestant Reformation was a religious movement which had deep political consequences, because it was criticizing the church, which was the only the major political institutions during the Middle Ages. It was dominating politics. And so Martin Luther wanted to get back to the church of the origins, but eventually his movement made something new that, you know, brought us to the future, because first it was a source for the development of modern individualism. We live in the Western civilization, an individualistic society, and Protestant countries are even more individualistic. What does it mean? This means that in all societies, communities were more important. You know, the family, the local community, the guild to which you belong, the corporation to which you belong, the community was more important, and especially the community of, you know, religious people who were gathered together, and we used the church to talk, to have a relationship with God. The Protestant reform say you as an individual, you can have your direct relationship with God. You don't need this intermediation. So it fostered the development of modern individualism. So humanism, Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, and then we saw this very, 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 very important other intellectual movement, which we called contractarianism, meaning the theories of the social contract, which we study to understand the foundation of the most important thing that we have in politics nowadays. The most important, which is the state. The state is the most important thing we have in politics. We live politically through states nowadays. The most important unity of politics is the state. The states are sovereign states. They control the territory, they have the monopoly of violence over the territory, but among them they are all sovereign, and this is why we have war. We have war because in the international system, more states are still sovereign, as we saw by studying Hobbes, and so they manage their conflicts sometimes through war. This is why we say that war is the continuation of politics with other means, or we can also say vice versa, that politics is the continuation of war through other means, because we saw through Hobbes that the idea of the state was born in order to guarantee self-preservation of human beings, because Hobbes imagined that in the state of nature it was a war of all against all. There was always the possibility of violence, because everybody was sovereign over himself or herself and could decide every time to use violence against the other human beings in order to take advantages, to take more resources, to take more power, and so on. So I say we have to establish a sovereign in order to remove this war of all against all in society. So this is the foundation of the state. So we have seen this big intellectual movement which we call contractarianism, and which is the idea that the state is the result of a social contract between individuals that agree to establish a sovereign and to obey to the laws of the sovereign, to obey them even when they are unjust, even when they think they're immoral. This is the foundation of the states. Nowadays we live through states, but actually this was invented like just 400 years ago. Almost for 1,000 years and a half, we didn't have states. We lived through empires, through cities. They were constituted through as republics, and so on and so forth, as we saw by studying antiquity and the Middle Ages. Modernity, politically, modernity is characterized by the invention of the state, which is marked by the idea of sovereignty, which is studied through Hobbes, and then through Locke. We studied the foundation of liberalism, which is how to limit the power of the state, and then we studied the idea of democracy through Rousseau, which has the problem how to be equal within the state. So what we see is this intellectual movement, humanism, Renaissance, the theories of the social contract, and then we get in the 18th century to Enlightenment. Enlightenment summarizes all this intellectual development, all these theories, because it's a big movement which wants to transform the world by saying everything that is rational is real, everything that is real is rational. We have to establish the government of the reason. We have to establish the government of the reason, and this means science, and this means that we can organize politics through rational means, and this means guarantee individual rights to all human beings. And this also means the idea of progress. The idea of progress means our life, the life of society, can improve, can become better and better and better if we apply reason to politics. If you organize politics in a rational way, the future can be an improvement of the past. And politics should be organized in order to ensure progress, in order to ensure progress. So, we see this movement of the ideas. This movement of the ideas that were developed in Europe over 250 years. The 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, we have all this idea that grows up. Okay? But this idea at the end had big consequences, because they fostered two major political events which made these ideas reality, which made these ideas institutions. And these are the American Revolution and the French Revolution. These two revolutions took all these ideas, and especially the ideas of the social contract, and made them reality. They took the idea of social contract and they made reality. And the ideas of the Enlightenment directly produced this revolution. So we're going to address these two revolutions today and Wednesday, and then we will consider, and then afterwards we will consider that third revolution, which is not a political revolution, which is not a political revolution, but is still a very important revolution, which is, who knows this revolution, this third revolution. So we're going to study three revolutions: American Revolution, French Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. It was not a matter, of the idea of people saying, yeah, the Enlightenment is right, let's make this revolution. But we saw that all these ideas fostered a scientific transformation, development of science. Science then, has an application into technology, and technology produced the Industrial Revolution, which fostered a powerful force, a powerful political force, a powerful force of transformation that is still nowadays a very strong force in our system, which is capitalism. So, but this we will see after the break. As you know, we'll have a break on Wednesday for almost 1 month that we're going to rest in the last part of the course. So, I'm undecided if starting with the American Revolution or the French Revolution. They're almost, it's just 3 years of difference in the beginning, in the starting. So, but we had Shreya, who was supposed to enter the French Revolution. She disappeared, like her colleague Maki, which had present over the, Maki didn't have to present, but it's a recap by Anna on Montesquieu. She's not here. So, we start with the American Revolution. Let's see if Shreya's gonna get back to present it. So, American Revolution. Let's start with the American Revolution, which is, is also more simple. So, I want to say something. When you come to the exam and I ask you the American Revolution and the French Revolution, for me is always a problem. Because students say, yeah, American Revolution intended this, and this, it was this war, there was this problem, but this is not a course of modern history. This is a course of history of political thought. So when you come and I ask you American Revolution and French Revolution, I want the ideas of these two events. This is why, before taking the exam of history of political thought, it's compulsory for you to already have taken the exam of modern history, because you're supposed to know what happened in these moments. So I don't want the facts, I want the ideas. Okay? So we saw that 1492, we considered it as a symbolic point of origin of modern age. That time is what we call the discovery of America. When Cristoforo Colombo, arrived, he wanted to go to India, but he arrived to America. So we consider the foundation of modernity. But we also say that this actually was an act of colonization. It was the beginning of the colonization. This colonization was very, very, very hard in all Central and South America, because then you had huge ancient civilization like the Mayas, which were completely destroyed and genocide. But this also happened in North America when we had communities of the Indian Americans. They called Indians because they were going to India. They thought we're going to India, and then they discovered these guys and said, we're Indians. They were not Indians. They were the Native Americans. And there was, a lot of violence against this in order to produce this colonization of the United States of America. Who did this colonization? Who were the guys? This was the British Empire who made this act of colonization, who colonized the North America, So there was this new land, and the Britons, the British Empire said, who wants to go there in order to start a new life? So who were going there? were the actors of this new land. These were different kind of people, criminals who wanted to escape the Great Britons because they were persecuted by law, or because they were being persecuted and they wanted to start a new life. So criminals, marginal people, and also people who were persecuted for religious reasons, because we know that there was the Protestant, it became a Protestant country, but then you have a lot of Protestants who started new sects, new beliefs, and so on, but they were not allowed, so they went to America in order to develop their own beliefs, religious beliefs as they want, So marginal people, criminals, religious people who were persecuted and not allowed to do these things. So this was the kind of people you had starting this colonization of the part that nowadays we call the United States of America. They established 13 different colonies. 13 different colonies. And they were there, they developed, a flourishing economy because they had an entire land to start, new business, new enterprises. So it became a flourishing economy. But then, they had to pay taxes to the British Crown. They didn't like this. So the first claim to which the American Revolution started was no taxation without representation. So they said, look, we have no seat in the English Parliament. We have no voice in any of the British Empire political institutions, but we are taxed hard. We have too much taxation. Till nowadays, Americans are obsessed with taxation. Time you meet people that comes to America, from America to Europe, they ask you, how much is taxation here? 22%. Really, 22%? How can you accept this? We would make immediately a revolution for this. Then you explain that, but we use it to pay schools and healthcare and so on. But they don't like taxation, and the revolution started against taxation because the British Empire put a new tax on tea tax, and they say, no, we're not going to pay if we don't have representatives. So, and also they asserted that the British Parliament has no power to impose taxes on them, as none of the 13 North American colonies had any representative members of the Parliament. Okay, so this was the start of this thing. Obviously, France had a conflict with the Britons, so they kind of stayed with backed, let's say, the revolutionaries. So this started in 1765. 13 colonies in 1765. They started this fight that you had seen here, and so there was 11 years of war of independence. 11 years of war of independence. Until when? Until Independence Day. 4 July 1776. 13 colonies, they said, now we are independent. Now we are independent. And they wrote this very important paper, the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence. What is the Declaration of Independence about? Let's read. This is a very important text. At this point, the Declaration of Independence, what does it do? It says, the King of Great Britain has done this. The King of Great Britain has done this. The King of Great Britain has done this. Why? Because they say they want to demonstrate that the sovereign of Great Britain, the king, has violated the social contract that should bond him to the nation, to his subjects. So what we see in this Declaration of Independence is kind of a recap of many ideas we have seen so far the crystallization of many ideas we have seen so far. Because what does it say? Let's see again after the preamble. It says,
which impelled them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
So we see, we hold this truth to be self-evident. So we recognize reality through rationality. And through rationality we see that these truths are self-evident. First of all men are created equal. And these are the principles of the social contract of enlightenment. Because at the time we still lived under societies in which human beings were not considered equal, because it was divided into different groups, like the aristocracy. And one man who was born as aristocratic was considered different as the rest of the population. So there was still a feudal society in which you had aristocratic organization of society. You thought some men were divided, were different. So the United States was, and the king was somehow the most important representative of the aristocracy, because he was king for the will of God. So it was the most important part of the aristocracy. But then you have other members of the society who were considered different by nature somehow. It's a system. We still, like for example in India, we have the system of castes, right? Yeah, which is something similar. What is the system of castes? Okay, thank you very much. So, let's say in India they still have a system of castes somehow, which is not anymore legally recognized. But this was, medieval Europe and even early modern Europe, you had a system of you were not born equal. What we call the American dream. The American dream is, even if you are born very poor, you can become a billionaire. You can become, even if you, Barack Obama already say, a lower class guy who was born in the suburb of Chicago, he became the president of the United States of America. The American dream is we are equal in terms of opportunity, because anybody can get access to any positions in society. When the American Revolution happened, there was not a system of equality. Not all human beings were equal. Why? Because first of all, you have slaves. And they even took 100 years more after the American Revolution to abolish slavery. So you had slaves. Then, there was a kind of system like aristocratic system. There was the aristocracy, then there was the clergy who had different rights, and it was not that if you were born if your father had a position in society, probably they were supposed to be the same position. If you were born as part of the aristocracy, you were an aristocrat. Even if you were the worst person in the world, but you were entitled to certain rights, you were entitled to get some, privileges and so on. The aristocracy, why you were an aristocrat? We will see this more in depth, considering the French Revolution, which was a revolution against the status of aristocracy. But the idea of the origin of aristocracy was the idea that at the beginning there was some group who conquered a territory, who were the warriors, who were the soldiers, who were more strong, conquered their territory, and through this conquest they got some special rights, which are privileges, due to the fact that they were the conquerors at the beginning of the story. And so the aristocracy is the class of the warriors, was the class of those who were able to wage war, and so they didn't have to work because they had to focus, on studying and on developing, skills to be good soldiers, to be warriors, and so on and so forth. And then there was the monarch, and then there was all that were related to monarchy. You know that still nowadays in the UK, which is a democratic country, but you still have, this system of aristocracy is important because you have the queen, you have the king, and you have the lords, and so on and so forth. So, this principle, all men are created equal. The United States was the first country in the world which at the time, considered everybody to be equal, because in the rest of Europe there was not the case. There was not a system of equality, there was a system of inequality. You were born the son of a carpenter, you belonged to the guild of the carpenters, to the corporations of the carpenters, and you were supposed to become carpenter. There was not the fact that you could access any level of any position and any level of government. So, this was the situation. All men are created equal. The idea of the social contract, the idea of enlightenment. So, all men are created equal, and they are adored and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Here we see the ideas of the founding father of liberalism, John Locke, that, as we saw in his book on the Treatise of Government, says that men, human beings, have natural rights. Locke says natural rights to life, freedom, and property. And so it looks like, Locke, but then they replaced property, which sounds a bit greedy, with the pursuit of happiness. But we all know that in the United States, the pursuit of happiness goes through property. Private property goes through having a lot of money, usually. So it's, this formulation, the pursuit of happiness, remains very unclear and very, very open. So they really used the ideas of John Locke, of the founding father of liberalism. This idea that crucial things are that the principle of politics is these individual rights which are unalienable, and that the principle of the government is that it should respect and protect this. So we see that then the Declaration of Independence says to secure these rights, government are instituted among men. So human beings establish governments in order to secure these rights. This is, the main principle of liberalism. This is the main principle of liberalism, which is the idea that political power, political authority is the first objective, the first goal is to secure these rights, to protect rights. It's not that governments are instituted because we like politics, we want to promote equality and so on and so forth. No, governments are instituted in order to protect these rights, because we remember the theories of John Locke, which is within the state of nature, and a conflict arises, we don't know how to regulate this conflict. And if the natural rights of some individual are violated, we have no means to protect these rights. So it's the ideas of liberalism that we have to establish political power in order to protect these rights, and that this is the first and most important goal of political authority, to protect rights. And so that the legitimation, origin of the legitimacy of political power is to protect these rights. And then there is this idea that deriving the just powers from the consent of the government. This is the principle of the social contract. The origin of power comes from the consent of the government, from a social contract. Okay, so we see that we have the ideas of Locke that becomes the Declaration of Independence, that becomes political institution.
That they are endowed by their Creator with certain whenever any form of government.
And so, then here we have the other rights promoted by Locke. So called by Locke, which is not anymore an individual right, but is the collective right to resist unjust government. The collective right to resist unjust government means that when government violates your rights, infringes your rights, does not respect your rights, you have the right to overthrow the government. Okay? Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of this end, it is the right of the people. So this is a collective right to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So, there is the goal of the government is to protect individual rights. But if the government does not respect individual rights, there is a collective right to resist and overthrow the government. And so we have exercised the natural right to resist and overthrow the government, to declare our independence. And so from this point on, the rest of the Declaration of Independence is a long list of acts made by the Kingdom of the United States to demonstrate that he violated the social contract, that he did not respect the rights of the members of the 13 colonies. And so that they want to establish the United States independence of the United States of these 13 colonies. Okay, so this is very important. This is very important that you read the Declaration of Independence and that you understand the link of the Declaration of Independence with the ideas we have studied so far.